Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 33. Today we take a look at Ben the Meter Eater Teo and ask, can a two-time Test Lion only be a finisher in an England shirt? You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're kind of getting back on track with the player profiles. I'm joined obviously by Dan as always, and he's actually taking the lead on this one. So I think probably without further ado, I'll just hand you over to Dan. And he can tell you what today's episode's all about. Hi, mate.
Hi, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to what it is you've dug up on today's focus.
So today, I think we went fairly topical with Benjamin Meter Eater Teo. So
is that his real name, or is that a play on the fact that he likes meat?
Meter Eater, I think, is a play on the fact that he makes a few yards on the pitch. Actually,
that kind of meter rather than meat.
Yes.
Fair enough.
I would like to claim it as my own, but I actually saw it in an article, and it's spelt meter as in distance. So I'm guessing that's what it's a play on. But do you know what? He's different to what I thought he was, if I'm honest. Like, reading about him, he's there's a bit more sort of, I'll go through it, but there's a bit more to him. I thought he was probably more placid, shall we say. But right, so Benjamin Teo, he was born in Auckland, New Zealand on the 27th of January 1987, which makes him 30 now, and therefore he'd be 32 come the 2019 World Cup, which I don't think would be a major issue. He was born, his father is Samoan, called Tilly, and his mother is English, called Linda. She actually emigrated to New Zealand as a teenager, where she met her father and had kids. He has 5 siblings, although I can only dig up information on 3 of them. 2 of his brothers, Sam and Jesse, and 1 sister who remained nameless but just said that she's a doctor. So, we'll sort of take that for what it is. He's 6'2", 106 kilos or 16 stone 10, so coming up 17 stone. So that's pretty big. He's so interestingly, I thought he was rugby league all the time up until he joined Leinster. But actually, as a kid, as he said, he sort of quite often swapped between league and union. In his words, it's all footy. So he had played union, but realistically, league is where he sort of made his mark. He represented New Zealand as an under 16 and an under 18. But
I wonder why. I mean, I'm sure you'll come onto it, but you represent New Zealand at those sort of levels, and then at league, and then when you decide to switch to union, you don't want to represent the best team in the world.
Well, yeah. So it was. I think New Zealand. It was schools. I mean, he was at school in New Zealand, so I think it sort of kind of made sense. But I'll actually, later on we'll mention sort of his move to the union, and perhaps there's a lot of conflicting information. But I've seen one sort of story, which I'll get onto a bit later, about why he maybe moved over to our shores. But actually, so age 17, he was a member of the Warriors, which is like New Zealand's flagship rugby league franchise, and they actually got rid of him. They sort of said he was overweight. He just wasn't good enough. And actually, it's quite interesting. I saw a picture of him, and to call him fat's unfair because it's not true. But he's certainly not the sort of guy we see today. He had a bit more timber to him.
Bit of a paunch.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was quite a surprising picture, actually. But he was, clearly good, because there was a guy, Greg Lenton, who runs the rugby league program at Keebra Park High School in Australia, which is apparently very well known for their rugby league, sort of one of the best. And he sort of saw Ben Teo and said, look, you've got a lot of potential. I want you to come over, but if you come over, firstly, you have to lose a lot of weight. and you have to sort of show you're committed, because actually at the time he had what's called compartment syndrome in his calves, which I mean, I'm not, maybe Poddoc would have been better to sort of explain this, but just meant that he wasn't sort of able to run that much on his calves, had the extra weight, but he had to lose weight quickly and did so. So he went over, they gave him a scholarship, and just really didn't look back. I mean, I know Greg Lenton, this guy there, just said he was just so raw, but such an incredible talent when he turned up. On his first day, he said to him, "Your lines are terrible. They need to be better if you want to make it." And apparently he replied, "What's a line?" Which I think somebody who's represented New Zealand under 16s at this point probably shouldn't be asking, and under 18s at this point probably shouldn't be asking, what's a line?
Yeah, I mean, I get in trouble for saying it, but I suspect that's the difference between league and union, isn't it? You know, league, they're all about just smashing straight. You know, the only line they need to worry about is the one directly between them and the posts. Whereas obviously in union it's a little bit more subtle than that, and it's all about picking good lines. And he's clearly learnt a few things since, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, definitely. Because I like, especially on the lines, though, I just thought some of the lines of it were absolutely brilliant. I mean, yeah, he tends to run into heavy traffic, and he's known for that, but not always. You know, he was making honest breaks as well with that. But I mean, he went there, and this guy, Greg Lenton, who runs the Keeper Park High School in Australia, which also helped him get his sort of first rugby league. So for rugby league, he played for West Tigers, Brisbane Broncos, South Sydney Rabbitohs, where he also played with Sam Burgess, obviously. And I think they're fairly close. And he also played in the State of Origin for Queensland quite a few times. And as well as that, represented Samoa for Rugby League. So the Samoa, and this is something actually I'm going to bring up now, because quite a few people mention, like, oh, he'd played in New Zealand schools. I think the schoolboys thing you can just cut aside. I don't think that really matters. I mean, Jono played for New Zealand schools. But he played for Samoa, but actually he said, like, yeah, my dad's Samoan, my mum's English. I'm very proud of both heritage. And I'm like, actually, I think that's a fair enough answer.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's, so when he said his dad was very proud for him to play for Samoa, I mean, he says now he considers himself English. He always has. And it brings, he's always been very proud of his English heritage. And it brings great joy to his mum that he represents England. So, I mean, anyone who says, like, oh, should he? I think that's a load of crap. I think he 100%. His mother's English. Yeah, why?
Without question. Like, I think, yeah, there are plenty of people out there who don't have any connection other than the time they've spent in country.
Yeah.
You know, and people who are certainly more so until recently when they changed. Have they changed the laws? I think they have, haven't they? It's now 5 years. But certainly, or they're about to. Or
yeah, I think it is 5 years. And I think this is just France. In France, you have to have a French passport as well, but that may just be France. I'm not sure if that's gone across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I read one of the main reasons for it was that the 3-year rule they had previously meant that people could actually move to a different country and play in a World Cup.
Yeah,
you know, and then move back. Whereas this obviously means they have to stay there through an entire World Cup, miss a World Cup, and then if they want to then change not codes, but, you know, change countries, look to the next World Cup, which I think makes sense, because it does stop people from doing exactly that, thinking, well, I'm not going to get a game for my home country. I'm going to go and move to, you know, Italy or somewhere, spend 3 years there, represent them in a World Cup, and then I'm going to go home again.
Yeah, it 100% makes sense, and I'm glad they're sort of tightening down on that. But
yeah, where he's concerned, it's completely irrelevant, because if his mum's English, then he has as much right to play for England as he does for Samoa. You know, the only question mark you'd have if you were that way inclined would be the time he played for New Zealand.
Yeah, but I mean, like
not that I do, but
yeah, not at all. And I think schoolboy is probably very different, because you play for, like, if you're in school in New Zealand, you play for New Zealand schools. If you're like, if if an English guy is in school in Wales, he'll probably play for Welsh school. So that doesn't faze me at all, and it doesn't. And I think he's got every right to play for England as any of the other guys, really, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he does. But I mean, he was playing rugby league, obviously, so up to there. And actually, so the reason I bring this up is that I'm not going to get all gossip columny about all this, but he was accused of assault when he was because he'd moved to Australia, obviously, at this point, and was playing in Australia. And he'd been accused of assault. And he said, now I've heard conflicting things, but he just said that, and I want to make this clear, he was 100% cleared. He was cleared by the police. He was cleared by the NRL integrity unit. So, there's no sort of saying he did this, he's completely cleared. So as far as I'm concerned, 100% innocent, but he kept getting sort of hassle for it, basically. And he just said he'd had enough. He was not one to sort of hold his words. So he wanted to sort of leave, and he wanted to sort of go and try something else in rugby union. And what actually happened is he took the advice of Michael Checker, who was good friends with his agent. And Michael Checker obviously used to coach Leinster. And he's like, look, go play there. They're a great team. And at the time, they'd just lost Bod. So, replacing him is not going to be an easy task and won't happen. But he's like, yeah, sure. Why not? I'll give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'll come back, play rugby league. But he went over to Leinster in 2014, signed, did well. In the first 20 minutes of his debut, he actually broke his arm. But yeah, exactly. Not probably what they were looking for. But once got over that, played, did well, and then he actually wanted to play Premiership. So he'd sort of seen the Premiership, liked it, had a chat with Eddie Jones, and Eddie Jones basically said to him, look, if you come play Premiership, you'll get your chance to impress. Like, no promises, but you'll get your chance as everyone else. And as far as I'm concerned, you're the same as anyone else. If you're good enough, you're in. If you're not, you're not. So he joined Worcester. I don't really know why Worcester, but for whatever reasons, joined Worcester.
Availability, maybe they were looking for a centre.
Yeah, I'm sure, and has done well. And actually, it was a fairly big money move, so I suspect that probably played a part as well. And since then, he's done well enough, staked his claim. He's now got 8 England caps, 2 tries, 2 Lions caps as well. His full debut for England, I feel a bit bad for him, was in that Italy match, just that absolutely ridiculous.
It's not the ideal way to debut, is it, for your country? But like you say, he's a Lion. Not only is he a Lion, he's a twice capped Test player. So he's clearly made the right people take note.
Yeah. Although we say he's a Lion, in 2013, when the Lions thought, so he is a Lion, of course he's a Lion, and absolutely deservedly. In 2013, when the Lions were touring Oz, he was actually supporting Australia because he's good mates with Izzy Folau, who was obviously playing for Australia at the time. So, let's brush that under the carpet. But
I'm sure he doesn't feel that way now.
No, not at all. And he talks about, there were interviews, and he talks about sort of his pride in representing England and representing the Lions. I mean, he's a lot more intense than I perhaps imagined him to be. He doesn't suffer fools at all. Like, if people say stuff he doesn't like, he will. There's a YouTube clip of him with a reporter just asking him, and he loses his cool a bit. Like, nothing, he doesn't do anything untoward, but he's a guy who's got a bit of a temper on him by the looks of it. He can, if you piss him off and rude, and in fairness, the reporter was being a dick. But if you've been rude to him, he appears to have no hesitation in saying so.
And it's quite nice. I quite like that. It's honest. You know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, it is nice. I mean, it has boiled over before when he lived with both his brothers back in Oz, and there was apparently a few guys came into the house to sort of try and find him and beat him up, and they weren't there, and his brothers were there, and they gave them nothing too bad, but gave him a bit of a slap. I think they're probably happy he wasn't there, because I can't imagine he's going to be the easiest guy to deal with. But I think that side of him has calmed down probably a lot more now. He seems to be very settled at Worcester. The sort of interviews I sort of read about from Worcester lot speak so highly of him, about sort of what he brings off the pitch as well, as a sort of person, as a sort of squad member. He's obviously committed again this season. So I think for Worcester, that could be good, because they've got Donegal O'Callaghan as well. Peter Sheen, don't they? You know, I think Worcester might be all right this year. And he's quite a loyal guy, but he will, you know, he will follow his ambitions. So when he was at Leinster, he loved Leinster, but he's like, I want to play Premiership. I want to have the chance for England. Yeah, so he came over to England.
Rightly so. He's going to do whatever it takes to you know, excel as far as possible in his career, and you would want nothing less. You know, it's all well and good saying how great it is when players are, you know, one club men and they stick with their clubs and they're loyal to a fault and all this sort of stuff. But actually, if you can be better by playing somewhere else, then go and be better. You know, go and be as good as you can be wherever it is you need to go in order to make that happen. As long as you don't, you know, prevent yourself from being able to play for England, please. At least not until after 2019.
Yeah.
But, you know, we want him to be as good as he can be. And if there's still plenty of room for him to get better, he's already looking pretty useful. If there's room for him to get better by playing for someone else, then I don't think he should be sticking with Worcester just because that's where, you know, that's the team that took him in when he was looking to move to the Premiership. And it doesn't sound like he's that kind of guy anyway. So I'm sure if the opportunities come calling, he'll consider them seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I understood from sort of looking about him, he's very straight talking, but he's very much his own man. So when he was coming over, in this interview, he actually said the reason he came over was to get away from the crap about the sort of assault, of which he was completely cleared. And he said that was his driving force, whereas other people said, oh, he came over for this. But he was interviewed and said, well, have you spoke to Sam Burgess, obviously, because Sam Burgess had been over and come back. And he was like, no, I haven't. Like, I make my own decisions. And it was just fairly blunt, fairly down the line. He was like, you know, Sam's let me know if I want advice. He's there, great, but I don't. And it was
fair enough.
Like, okay. So I don't think he's one to be swayed. I think he's very much his own man. Will you know, make the decisions that's right for him, sort of, you know, and that's great. But he seems to do it in a fairly honourable way. So when he was leaving, because he was with South Sydney at the time, he let them know in plenty of time and sort of said, look, this is what I'm going to do. So he's not leaving anyone, you know, he's not misleading anyone. Just very straight talking. And that's what I'm going to do. See you later.
Fair enough. Thing. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good. It's good. It's someone who clearly has you know, a clear vision of what he wants and what it's going to take to get there, and he doesn't get too swayed by, you know, the media and the people around him who are who might tell him what he should and shouldn't do. It's, you know, he's his own man, like you said. So that's what we want. That's what we want from our stars. Yeah, absolutely. And looking at him, so I recommend any of our listeners YouTube some of his workouts. They are intense. So, and actually, Andy, you'd mentioned this to me the other day about how perhaps rugby league's helped his defence. He's 100% said that. Like, he said it's helped, like, when if it's going high, just the wrestling factor that you get in league, but a lot more than union. But also his work, I mean, he's just driving, like, he'll work out to the max, and he looks an absolute beast. And I think he's, based upon the Lions and the Six Nations, the sort of glimpses we saw there, I actually think he's going to be a huge part of England over the next couple of years. Oh, you've got to think so. Whether, you know, we can talk about it in a moment, but you know, whether he's coming off the bench for impact or whether he's starting, and the game plan, you know, suits him. Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can't ignore a Lion for a start. You certainly can't ignore a Lion that's good enough to be selected for the Test team. And all that aside, you can't ignore the fact that he's just a very good rugby player. The way that he shut down Sonny Bill Williams in that first Test. Sonny Bill Williams was this huge threat. Lots of talk in the media about the damage he was going to do to the Lions, and he didn't really do any damage at all. It wasn't bad, obviously. But, Ben Teo was more than a match for him. And there was one hit in particular, and actually I think Teo, it was a penalty. There's talk that he was lucky to get away without a card. I've watched it a few times. I don't think it was that bad. It was one of those where it was, but did it land on his neck or was it his shoulders? And it was right on the cusp. And okay, maybe it went one way rather than the other. And we can talk all day about player welfare and everything else, and of course it's important, but the simple fact is Sonny Bill Williams, this big strong rugby player that causes teams problems, got absolutely put on his arse by Ben Teo in a massive hit that sent a message regardless of what happened. It would have been a shame if he'd gone off the pitch, but it sent a message, and Sonny Bill tried to do something similar or something equally as aggressive the following game, and he was off. Cost New Zealand the game. So I thought Ben Teo had a great game, and I thought defensively he was brutal, and that's what we want. We've said it so many times, haven't we? Looking at England playing rugby, looking at the Lions playing rugby, anybody. If your defence is brutal, we've got the players to do everything else. If you have a brutal defence, you just put teams on the back foot, and then the opportunities kind of open up. They present themselves. Against a world class side, you can't really pick opportunities out of nothing. You have to create them, and the best way to create them is to create the space that you get from having that sort of really strong defence that puts them on the back foot, that opens up the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And his defence is awesome. Like, he is, as is his attack. I've watched quite a lot of clips of him over the last few days, and he just is an absolute beast. Like, I would hate to defend against him, and I think everyone else would, and I'd hate to run at him. Like, if you're doing that to Sonny Bill, everyone can go on their arse, and then so he's such a powerful guy. He can make such an impact. Here's a question for you. Do you, and actually we did cover this last time, but do you start him?
I think I'm not sure it's that necessarily that clear cut. I think it depends who we're playing. I think that's what Eddie Jones will look at as well, because if you're comparing, and a lot depends on what you do. Ben Teo has obviously been an inside centre and an outside centre for the Lions. Predominantly, he played it inside. The fact that we've kind of said no, we agree that Ford Farrell is the 10-12 channel. The 10-12 combination means that you're looking at Teo as a 13, which is fine, but then that means you're leaving out JJ. And they're so different as players that I think you have to just take it one game at a time, and you have to say, right, well, who are we playing? What's the game plan for the team that we're playing? How is it that we're going to beat this team? And then select, whoever is the right person to fill that void. And I think he'll have his opportunities. I think he'll definitely start for England. Whether or not that's the case come 2019 remains to be seen. But I think there's an awful lot of Premiership rugby to come before those sorts of decisions need to even be made. For like the autumn internationals. And although we said actually in the last episode that we didn't think and we hoped he wouldn't, Eddie Jones has apparently come out and said that he does plan to rest some of the Lions, certainly some of the Lions stars.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said he sees the autumn internationals as a bit of a continuation from the June tour. So whilst I don't think he's looking to take out a really young side, I think maybe he's looking to move it along in phases. We'll see. Okay. He kind of did. The way it came across was very much that he was leaving it open, so that if he changed his mind, no one could say, "Hang on, you said you weren't going to do this."
Yeah.
But he definitely alluded to the fact that he didn't feel like he had to select the first 15 or the first 23 for the autumn internationals. There were players that he would probably rest, and I guess that's going to be where he's got positions where he's still not quite sure. Not so much about his first choice, but more where he's not quite sure about his second and perhaps third choices. So I guess if he knows for sure that, someone is his starting 10 or 12 or whatever, he may well decide, So I guess where I'm going with this, even though he played, we might see someone like an Owen Farrell being rested and a Ben Teo playing all the Autumn Internationals at 12.
Yeah.
Which would be interesting to see, although perhaps
I don't
not
think
that
we'll
valuable.
see that. I don't think we'll see that because I don't think that'll be Eddie Jones's game plan, regardless of whether Farrell's there or not.
I guess
but we may see him at 13.
Yeah, but I guess the thing at centre, especially if you're going to play ball carriers, is that if you did do that, if you played Ben Teo at 12 and you left Farrell at home, his performances wouldn't be limited to making a decision about whether he was a 12. You could look at his performances at 12
absolutely.
to make a decision as to whether you wanted to play him at 13. So it may be that he takes this as an opportunity to say, well, I'm torn between Teo and Jonathan Joseph, so I'm going to play them both. And essentially, I want to come off the back of these Autumn Internationals having decided which one of those two is my starting 13. I don't know. We could speculate all day long. I think we probably need to get a little bit further along, see how the Premiership kicks off, see how things are going. Injuries may well play a factor, and if everyone's fit and healthy, then we'll know more about where Eddie Jones's head is at when the time comes to start selecting his squad for autumn.
So when you mentioned that last time in the last pod, I was like, no, I don't like. But actually, so now saying it again, I think I'm going to change my mind a bit and say now's the time to do it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? You've still got enough time ahead of you to make changes now that aren't permanent. You're not yet at that stage where we have to be playing as a team from now on. But perhaps Six Nations next year is the time when you have to say, right, now we need to start thinking about who is our 23. And who are the fringe players around that 23 that form that ultimately form the World Cup squad. So it may well be that that's exactly what Eddie Jones is thinking. Start the real World Cup campaign, Six Nations 2018, and use the Autumn Internationals as that one last chance to test a few combinations, try out a few players, just to answer a few of the questions that perhaps he still has.
Yeah. No, and I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, from a fan's point of view, it would be disappointing, especially post Lions, seeing how so many of them did so well out there, not to see what our number one team looks like. But we're not playing New Zealand this year. We're not playing them until 2018. So, the next, obviously, we've got big games in the autumn against Australia. We've got Australia. We've got Fiji, I think. Is it Fiji?
We've got Argentina, obviously.
Argentina again. Have we got South Africa?
Do you know what? I need to double check. I think we have South Africa. I think we have South Africa and Australia, Argentina, and one other, which I thought was Fiji, but it could be somewhere. But I could be wrong about the ones I've said.
But he's got a few. There's a few big games in the autumn. But if he decides to take a understrength side and risk a few losses for the purposes of just nailing down his World Cup squad, I think then 2018 Six Nations, really good chance of doing some damage there, and that will be exciting. And obviously a result there will just set the tone for the rest of the year with the June tour and of course the Autumn Internationals 2018. There's a kind of not quite the final run, but certainly the first the final kind of full season before heading into World Cup year.
Yeah, so that'll be huge. That'll be absolutely huge. That whole year is going to be massive for rugby, for us to sort of just let ourselves know. Yeah, we're good enough to do this. We're going to do this, boys. We just get the right guys in the squad, get them all working together, get them. So as it was in 2003. I mean, come 2003. I just don't remember ever doubting them. And you know what? This team, I'm not there yet, but I'm starting to have that feeling about them. I'm starting to just think it looks good. Like we're talking about Ben Teo, a 2-capped Lion, and we're talking about, is he going to start for England?
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
It's not a bad position to be in, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a handful of them in that sort of boat. You know, the whole Jamie George, Dylan Hartley debate, which perhaps is less of a debate these days. But it's, you know, nevertheless, it is a question that needs answering. It's a question that will be answered in probably the next few months. Unless
you're going to rest anyone.
Well, I was going to say, unless that's another example where we don't see him in the autumn, which means that the question gets taken out of the hands of everyone because Dylan Hartley continues to do his job and continues to be the captain, and actually you look to make the changes, which is kind of what we said as well. 12 months, Six Nations 2018, new captain, new hooker. Dylan Hartley bows out gracefully. You know, that could all kind of fit together quite nicely.
Yeah. And it's starting to look, because I think I said, I don't think we'll see Dylan Hartley in an England top again. Now, because I'd imagine. Well, I think so, but I didn't think he'd rest him.
Yeah, and then the other big one is Kyle Sinclair, who you know has been touted as the future of. He's a tight head, I think. I'm going to get in trouble if I got that wrong again. I'm going with it. Kyle Sinclair is I think a tight head. Obviously, he is currently cover for Dan Cole, who is a legend of the game. To be fair, you know, he's Dan Cole probably still is the master, Kyle Sinclair the apprentice. But you know, the future for Kyle is very bright, and at some point that change will need to happen because you can't have all your best players on the bench. So again, we may well see Kyle was involved in the test matches, Dan Cole not. Maybe Dan Cole goes you know, on tour in the autumn and plays in the autumn internationals. Sinclair gets rested, and again, Six Nations is that big kind of, you know, it would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it? England making all these changes. 2018 Six Nations, England really mixing things up, making loads of changes, but no one really feeling like it meant that they had this young, inexperienced squad. You know, typically you see teams that do this, and you think, oh, it's going to take them a good few years to develop now.
Yeah.
Whereas this would almost be, we've had our first team sitting on the bench for a while. It's now their turn to take over this side. And I don't know, I get quite excited about the prospect of what England could look like when the changes finally come in. And you know, and I'm okay with them not happening now. I'm okay with leaving it a little bit longer, and I think the Six Nations could be a really good time to see that.
Yeah, mate. I mean, I completely agree. I'm just okay with any way he goes at the moment. To be honest.
He's not getting too many things wrong, is he? That's the main thing.
Yeah, exactly. And when he bloods these guys like Curry's, I was like, Jesus, well, like good for you. I'm really glad they were called up. And then it was just no. He's ready. Eddie Jones does seem to have that knack of just being like, yeah, I think you're good enough. I think you're ready. You'll play. Or equally of saying, you know, where a lot of people are shouting out saying, this guy, Jones just like, no, not for me, not my plans.
Yeah.
So
I think the most important thing with Eddie Jones is that he's very open about the fact that no one is kind of not worthy. Anyone can be good enough. Tom Wood is a prime example. Eddie Jones wrote him off and then immediately wrote him back on again when he said, no, look, in fairness, I said you weren't good enough and you weren't. You went away and got better. Now you are good enough. Simple as that. And it's exactly the way to look at this. You know, don't ever make players feel like they don't have a chance, because then they don't try. They don't get better, and you potentially miss out on being able to pick your absolute best. And it also means that your players who are already there don't get complacent.
Oh, completely. And Ben Teo actually in an interview said when he was being interviewed, and he's like, it wouldn't surprise me if Eddie Jones was sitting in the stand now. And it's like, the stand's empty. And it's like, he might still be there. You just never know. So it was like, you know, we're wearing a fake tash and comedy glasses, but he keeps them, I think Ben Teo, like Eddie Jones keeps them on their toes.
Yeah,
like,
which is good. I like it. And it's new. It's you know, it doesn't feel like the same old England.
No.
Not that, you know, the same old England has been pretty good over the years, but it just feels new. It feels fresh. It feels exciting, and I do feel like this is a team that genuinely, I believe, can and will win the World Cup in 2019. And seeing the Lions in New Zealand, and given that New Zealand is the only team that I think are capable of stopping them from winning the World Cup.
Yeah.
Seeing those New Zealand performances has just strengthened that belief, and that's not to take anything away from them. But if you thought there was a gap there before, in my eyes, that gap has closed completely. And it's anybody's game, and it's about who can do the job on the day, and that will be very interesting to see.
What I like is sort of Clive Woodward-esque. What I loved about Clive Woodward is he came in, he's like, couldn't give a shit what everyone says England's about, what they play. And he just went out there and played like he had no respect for sort of tradition or things like that. He's like, no, we're going to play the best rugby we can with the best players we can. And Eddie Jones, and hey, it worked bloody well. What a team. Eddie Jones sort of, I just think he's got that about him as well. He's pushing them, every single one of those players, improve or piss off.
Yeah.
And I love it.
No, I do too. I think it's very exciting.
Yeah. And, well, mate, yeah, sorry. I mean, obviously sort of diversified a bit from Bentia, but I mean, hey, that's the point. We sort of give a bit of a roundup about him. What a legend Bentia is, quite frankly. I think he's got so much more to give to England than I think he will.
Yeah, massive future ahead of him. Talking of ahead, there is, of course, a pretty big tournament coming up in just over 2 weeks, I think.
Yes.
The ladies in Ireland in their World Cup. And, of course, the England women currently number one in the world, the reigning world champions, I believe. But, certainly looking to win the World Cup this year. And we need to do a bit more research. I'm going to put my hands up now and say, to be honest, I haven't followed women's rugby particularly closely. But I feel that we now have a responsibility to look into it and bring our listeners a little bit of info on how that's all unfolding. So we'll certainly be doing that.
Definitely. We definitely need to. I actually watched the England women versus New Zealand in the last test when they won. England women are awesome. They're really good. So yeah, we agreed though. I also need to just read up a bit more about it, but we'll 100% do an episode for our women who we obviously like. I'm quite looking forward to watching that World Cup actually.
Yeah, it'll be good, and with any luck, they can do the job. They can win the win the World Cup, and it'll just set the tone for what we're really all about here, which is obviously monitoring the men as they head towards doing the same thing in 2019. So yeah, best of luck to the England women, and as you say, we'll be keeping a close eye on them and keeping tabs on them and sharing it with you guys. So keep listening.
Yeah.
Obviously, as always, rate us, review us, get in touch with us on social media at England Rugby Pod. We had a few people who have been in touch. The England women's rugby was actually suggested by one of our listeners who's just catching up with some of our episodes. So thanks for doing that. But yeah, get in touch with us. Ask us any questions you've got. Let us know what it is you'd like us to talk about. If there's anything you think we're not covering. You can also check out the website, www.englandrugbypod.com, or you can email us, englandrugbypod@gmail.com. There's lots of ways to get in touch, and it really helps us out and just lets us know that you're out there and that you're listening. So, we'd love to hear from you. Also, yeah, as I said, rate, review us on iTunes, spread the word, download us if you're only listening as a one-off for the first time. That way you won't miss anything in the future. And join us again next time.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Take care, guys.